What's up guys, Sean here, and this is going to be a couple quick little pro sharpening tips when using the Kme guided sharpening system that you may or may not have heard of. So a couple of these have been covered in my previous sharpening tips videos, but these are some tips that I find extremely helpful and actually quite essential to having success and getting a nice sharp edge. So let's get straight into it. Right here I have the Medford M48 clamped in here. Now, one of the biggest issues and one of the biggest reasons why people have trouble getting a sharp edge has to do with the blade not being clamped securely in your clamp. So if your blade can easily flex up and down, then you do not have a tight clamp. First thing you want to do, you want to turn it sideways, grab onto your knob, and use the knife itself as leverage to really crank down as tight as you can and make sure this clamp is as tight as possible. Then check it again, and if it's still loose, then you're going to want to loosen it up, reposition it, and pinch down as tight as you can and tighten it all the way down. Test it again, and that is how you find the best location to where you can get a secure clamp. Now ideally you want to have it clamped in the center of the blade. This goes for 99.9% of different blade shapes. You always want to be clamped in the center of the edge. So not the center of the blade, but the center of the edge. That way, from the center point, you have the same amount of distance that you have to go to either side, and that is going to help keep everything nice and uniform, help maintain that equal angle across the entire edge. Now with certain blade shapes this might vary. However, if you cannot get a solid clamp location there and the blade is, you know, flexing up and down, shifting side to side, and you can't get the clamp tight right there, then you might have to clamp it up further or clamp it further back, and that's okay. The solid clamp on the blade is the #1 priority. So your location, that is important for certain things, but if you can't get a solid clamp on that location, then you are going to have to make do with a less ideal location that can actually be clamp sturdy. Because when your blade is flexing up and down and you're having all that variation in the angle, I might not be hitting the entire edge, because if the angle in the back has now increased higher and the angle in the front has now decreased, then I'm actually going to be taking, I'm going to be reprofiling everything, and that's not what you want to do, especially halfway through. You want to do your reprofiling in the beginning, and you want to be able to maintain that profile throughout. Otherwise you're going to be chasing your tail. But one thing you can do to make sure you have it set right is check your angle with a angle finder. So I'm just going to throw a strop on here, just so I have the correct thickness, so I don't scratch up this blade. So right now, let's see, we'll set the Kme at 20 degrees per side. Okay, so it's at 20 degrees per side on the angle indicator. However, I have found that the angle indicator is not accurate. It's just a rough estimate. So you want to get yourself a digital angle cube. You want to set it on the base of your Kme. When you turn it on and zero it out, So we are going to press this down to zero it. There we go. We have it zeroed. Now, just place that on top. I happen to have a different stone holder cover, which has a piece of metal in it, so it's actually magnetic. But if you have the standard wood stone holder cover, then you can just hold the angle cube flat against it, or you can take a little metal strap. Here we go. Now I got a little baggie with like 5 of these from Lowe's. You can get these at any hardware store. I forget what it said on the bag, but it's just like a metal strap. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is take some super glue and just glue it to the top of your stone holder, and then you have a magnetic surface or a metal surface for the magnet to stick to. All right, so angle cube is on there. Gonna sit it flat. Okay, the KME indicator, it's at 20, but on the angle cube, it shows the angle is actually at 18 degrees per side. Now, does this really matter? Well, it depends. If you're sharpening a knife for a customer and they ask for a specific angle, they may care that there's a 2-degree difference. A lot of people wouldn't, but you know, say you're sharpening a hinderer, okay, which is much thicker behind the edge than your typical knife, and any angle below 20 degrees is going to leave you with a absolutely huge bevel. So for example, this is the Harpoon Spanto. That is a large edge bevel. Some people do not like a edge bevel that large. I personally don't mind it. I like a lower angle. It makes it pass through material a lot easier when initiating the cut. But some people might not like that. Some people might want to stick to the factory aesthetic of the nice, small, little, low profile edge bevel. And on a lot of knives, 20 degrees per side might be a very tiny bevel, especially when you're talking about a knife that is very thin behind the edge. So you might be thinking, yeah, that looks like approximately 20 degrees per side to you. Wrong. This is actually sharpened at 15 degrees per side, but the edge bevel is still small because this blade is that thin behind the edge. So you can't judge angle based off of looks unless you have an eye for the blade thickness behind the edge and you know, the different, you develop an eye for it over time. So I can look at the thickness of a knife and judge in my head what the edge bevel will look like at a different angle, but that takes a long time and a lot of knives, a lot of experience to get to that point. So the only time that you are really going to be able to judge just by looking at the knife is if you're talking about, you know, just doing the same knife. If you have 100 PM2s, then you know what a PM2 looks like at 17 degrees per side, at 20, at 25, at 15. So, you know, that's one case. But when it comes to different knives, you know, it could be completely different. So just something to keep in mind. Definitely good to have an angle finder or a digital angle cube. It's just very useful. Next thing, when you're getting your knife clamped in and set up, I always take extra time and extra care when doing this. All right, so before I clamp this in here, I open up my clamp jaws all the way and actually pop them off. And your little rubber insert right here, that keeps the blade from moving and getting scratched, you're going to want to clean those. All right, you want to, I just spray them with isopropyl alcohol and then wipe them off, and that's going to get rid of any steel particles that might have gone on them, any pieces of burr, any diamond fragments that might have came off of your diamond plates, anything that can cause scratching and be abrasive to the blade finish. You don't want to be marking up your blade finish, and you definitely don't want to be marking up someone else's blade finish. Now shit happens. If you're sharpening a knife, then obviously it's a user, and if it gets a slight mark, it's not the end of the world, but you want to do everything in your power to avoid it. And then you can have a clear conscience at the end of the day, knowing that someone's knife didn't get marked up because you were just being lazy and careless. Next up, you want to always protect the plunge grind if you can. So with this knife, it actually comes, your edge starts out past the plunge grind. So we clear the plunge grind by a good bit, see where that hollow grind ends, and it starts to, it's like a little ramp up to the flat, I guess, blade tang. So you don't want to hit that with the stone. The edge is all the way out here, but so I don't have to be so super slow right here in this section, to be careful and make sure I don't hit the plunge grind, I have a zip tie tied around the choil, and that is going to prevent the stone from being able to come past the end of the edge and hit the plunge grind. This will also prevent the stone from being able to hit the scale, anything past the edge that you don't want to hit. It stops you from hitting that. So these little zip ties, they are extremely useful. You can get these in a pack of 100 or 1,000 or whatever. I prefer these little ones. Now, on some knives, you might need something wider. So in that case, you can use 2 of them instead of 1. But it gives you a little bit of flexibility, because a knife like this right here, if this zip tie was thicker, then I might not be able to actually sharpen the end of the edge. So that's a little tip right there. Next tip, you want to always mark your clamp location. Once you figure out where you want this clamped, you need to mark it out so you can see if the knife shifts, because if the knife shifts when you're sharpening it, it will actually change the angle. Okay, so we showed that it was at 18 degrees per side on the angle cube. Now back here at the heel, it's 17.4. Up here at the tip, it's 17. But if this shifts, it might end up being 15 at the tip and 18 or 19 at the heel. And then you're going to have a big variation in the edge bevel from the tip to the heel, which is going to be exaggerated even further, because the tip of this knife is actually thicker for strength than the rest of the edge due to the hollow grind. So, that's something that is actually quite important, and I mark it out just with a Sharpie. I do it on both sides every time, and that's going to allow me to see if this blade shifts in the clamp, and I can correct it before I start changing my angle and end up having to completely reprofile everything all over again. So that is very important. Sometimes I have gotten to the point where I'll mark it when I'm first starting, and then as I'm going through, I'll just be watching the scratch pattern. Yes, you can do this if you're experienced and you know what you're looking for, but I have found that it actually does me a lot more harm than good to not continue to mark it, because if you're only going off of what you see on the scratch pattern, that can actually trick you, especially because when you're sharpening and you're looking at that scratch pattern, as you're sharpening, you are leaving steel particles and little dust behind, and that can actually trick your eye into thinking that you need to hit a spot again, or that you're not hitting a spot right, or you know, it can mess with you. And if you continuously mark the edge, you'll be able to see that you hit everything that you needed to, and then you can flip. So that's going to prevent you from continuing to do more than you need to do. And that's something that I've found that was an issue with myself before. You know, I'll just stay on a side and make a lot more passes than I need to, which ends up being a lot more time when everything's said and done, because there's so many different steps to the progression. So each time you flip it, an extra 5 or 10 minutes every time you flip it throughout the whole thing, that adds up to extra hours possibly, you know. So this is all stuff that I find very useful. And one more that I just remembered, your stone holder, you have this little metal piece back here that clamps your stone in. After a couple sharpenings, you will find that this stops holding your stone in here tightly. When that happens, what I did, I took a little piece of cardboard, I cut out a little cardboard strip just to fit in here, okay, just right there, and I super glued it to the back, the metal backing, and that gives it just that little extra bit of thickness to get a nice tight clamp to where that is not going anywhere, not moving around at all, and it's going to stay snug. So that's that. And oh shit, one more, your stop collar. This is going to prevent you from riding up onto the edge. So when you're doing your edge leading pass going into the edge, if this was not set, look, you are, see that? Your stone is up past your edge, which means your stone is going to ride up onto the face of the blade, and it's going to scar up this nice satin finish. And it's going to look really bad, especially on a blade that doesn't have any signs of wear. So make sure you're setting your stop collars. Same thing can happen when you are coming back. If you aren't paying attention and you're pressing down, you have pressure down on the stone as you're pulling back, and you pull back too far and you slide off, you are going to come down, and the bottom of this nut right here is going to hit into the edge. You might hit into the edge with the corner of the nut, or you're going to hit into the edge with the shaft. All right, and that is going to either chip or roll your edge depending on the steel, and also can end up marking up the blade the face of the blade. So that's another thing to pay attention to. Make sure you are not going too far in and you're not coming too far out. You want to stay you know, in between the stone. So that's why I've heard people say you want to do kind of shorter strokes. You want to make use of your stone, but not at the expense of accidentally destroying the work that you're doing. So that's going to be it for this one, guys. Hope these quick tips were helpful, and stay tuned because I'm about to show you guys 3 cool knives that are in for sharpening that I have not experienced before. So thank you all for watching. I love you guys. Jesus loves you. Stay tuned. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.